we have a great program, so I'll just get right to it. I'd like to ask our keynotes to join us on the stage, please. So our keynotes, when I first spoke to them about setting the tone for the day, asked a question I think many of you also emailed us to ask, which is what exactly do we mean by audience engagement? So they have the tall order of trying to flesh that out. So we have moderator Federica Cherubini, formerly with Winterfish. She was my counterpart in some ways that helped to organize a lot of digital events there. She was also on our voluntary program team that helped us organize the conference today, so I was very excited to have her help us out. She's with the Reuters Institute at Oxford now, and just published a report on editorial analytics. It's very recent, a couple weeks, a few weeks ago. So if you haven't seen that, it's available to you on the Reuters Institute page. It's also linked in Federica's Twitter profile, so very easy to access, and I really encourage you to check that out. We also have Renee Kaplan, Head of Audience Engagement at the Financial Times and former editorial director for France 24, and Mary Hamilton, Executive Editor for Audience at The Guardian, and was formerly Head of Audience at their New York and Sydney offices. And so with that, I'll turn things right over to you, Federica.
Thank you, Carol. Hello, everyone. So we're here today to talk about people we may know, we should definitely know, our audience. And so we will try to understand what we know about the community we serve, how do we know it, and what action we take based on that knowledge. So as Trevor mentioned, we will start with trying to understand what exactly is audience engagement. Sometimes it's kind of a buzzword. That can mean many things. We've all heard said that we want to harness the power of an audience, but what does that mean? So with Renee and Mary, we'll discuss what we know and what we don't know, and the instrument that we have to understand our audience and the decision that we take. So can we start to say, how do you define the work you do? In terms of, I want to understand what are the moving parts to engagement, what is unique of your role, and what you have in common.
Sure, thank you. I spent a little bit of time thinking about how to describe audience engagement because it's become such a kind of round, slick term that we use all the time, so that it begins to mean nothing. As our Reuters host was saying earlier, sort of like digital disruption or stickiness. And I have a broadcast background, so it sort of reminds me of the term producer, which means absolutely everything and nothing, depending on your news media. So at a certain point, what does audience engagement mean, however, for all of us, is what I was trying to think of an answer to. What is it that we share, no matter what your medium is, whether you're a digital native or legacy broadcast, legacy print? What are kind of the shared parts of audience engagement? Is something I try to think a lot about, especially as I try to describe what I do to my mother or my friends. And so I think fundamentally, no matter what your media is, it's about getting your content out in front of audiences, people, more of the right audiences, people who are actually going to care about your content, who are going to get value out of it, who are most likely to sort of be impacted by it. I think that's something we do all share. Fundamentally, though, it's sort of, okay, that's great, so we want to get our content out. That's not really necessarily new. What I think is new and quite unique about audience engagement versus the distribution that anybody who's doing in a sort of pre-digital world is the idea of a relationship between you and your audiences, and of thinking about distribution as a relationship and getting your newsroom to think about distribution as a relationship, where it's not enough anymore in newsrooms to think that, okay, our audiences are there. It used to be that, like, page views, they're there, that's good. Now I think there's a notion in audience engagement that we have to be there for our audiences, that we have to be there giving them value, that we have to be there giving them something that's relevant to them, that we have to be there giving them something that pleases them, delights them, that they can rely on. All of the elements that are part of, theoretically, a healthy, functional relationship, or in any case that makes you want to commit to a relationship. And so treating your audiences like a relationship, or rather building a relationship with audiences, and then putting a metric to each of those different parts of a relationship, so that a newsroom, and every single person in the newsroom, can begin to think about, how am I doing on the commitment front? How am I doing on the getting value front? How am I doing on the getting pleasure or delight front? And so really trying to think of it as not just being there, rather not just them being there for me, but us being there for them. Sort of how we define it.
That's a pretty good definition. So the way that I tend to think about audience engagement is working out what exactly it is that we want people to do in response to what we produce, working out how we change what we produce or the ways that we might sort of distribute that based on that target, that goal, and then working out how we kind of engage in a two-way conversation or relationship with the people who we most want to do stuff with what we do. So that's really kind of broad and vague because it's different for every news organisation. And I think there's this sort of tendency to feel like there might be a kind of one-size-fits-all approach. And you see this around things like the way that news organisations write headlines for Facebook, for example. Someone finds something that works really well, and then everybody else copies it, and then Facebook deprioritises it, and then the whole cycle goes kind of round in a beautiful circle. And actually, the question isn't how do we hack this system, the question is what do we actually want people to do, what are we trying to prompt? It used to be very simple, relatively simple, it used to be, you know, buy the paper, and on a good day top of the government. But, you know, that metric of impact is still really difficult to pin down, still really difficult to understand. But fundamentally there's something there about making people do something in response to what we're doing. Now, there are so many more things that people can do in response to what we're doing. They can have a bit of a shout about it on Twitter, they can do anything from, you know, the range of available actions is so much greater. But fundamentally, we're still trying to do things that are actually quite similar. We're still trying to reach people with our journalism and get them to take some sort of action, whether that's just reading beyond the first paragraph or, you know, doing something else. And yeah, the actual mechanics differ, I think, quite widely based on what it is that you're trying to get people to do. If you're working at a local news company, you're probably going to have quite a different strategy and quite a different approach than we do at The Guardian, for example. And, you know, The Guardian and the FT have very different business models and very different approaches as a result. Fundamentally, it's about working out what that strategy is and then trying to get that strategy working across everything in a joined up way. So yeah, like the way that I compartmentalise things for my role is we look at reach and optimization, how we get our journalism to where people are, loyalty and engagement and habits, how we get people to form the habit of reading us every day, wherever they are, and through to things like participation. How do we get people to come to us with stories? How do we get people to participate with us when we're writing, when we're doing our journalism? And how do we build that back into our journalism? So there's there are these three sort of broad spectrums of behaviour that we're trying to achieve. But other people will define it differently, I guess.
Yep. Interestingly, when we think about engagement and sort of how operationally we're doing it, so you talk about sort of these actions, what do we want our audience to do? It's exactly fundamentally the goal that we all want to achieve for certain kinds of actions. The portfolio of actions might be different depending on your medium. But what are those actions? Those actions are indeed the metrics for the value they're getting out of your content. They're the proxies, they're the ways that you can judge, am I in this relationship? Am I enjoying it? Am I staying committed to it? And I think that sort of defining those different actions and explaining them to the newsroom is absolutely key. I would say that, you know, as an engagement team at the FT, we probably have sort of two goals. One is external engagement, which is indeed growing the reach and the impact of our journalism. So really, we want to grow our audiences. Fundamentally, we have a paid content model. We need more people who eventually will get enough value out of the content to pay for it. But it's also about internal engagement. And I think this is an aspect that is often talked about in a different bucket, or sometimes even a different venue, which is the cultural change and the structural change and getting newsrooms to restructure. That's as integral, at least at the FT, it's integral to our mission as an engagement team as the kind of external engagement with our audiences. Because you can't, from the top down, say, love your audience. You can't say, love the person you're in a relationship with. It really does have to be bottom up. And so, you know, this is also, and we'll get to this, I'm sure, later, this is where sort of data comes in, where you want to measure the different actions that are being taken to acknowledge the relationship that our users are in with our content. But each of those actions needs to equal something in the newsroom. And the newsroom and a single granular journalist needs to understand, why do I care more about something than page views? Oh, I see. Recirculation rate means, or retention means that they actually enjoyed my story enough, or something was compelling and engaging about my story that they stuck around to read more stuff by me, or more stuff in my topic, or more stuff in my section. one of them, my story was web published in a digitally optimized way enough that they actually scrolled down the page to lower. They actually watched the video. There was a completion rate. All of these are granular proxies of a commitment to a relationship that every single journalist needs to understand is not so much a metric of their performance, but a metric of their relationship with the newsroom. So our goal is both that kind of external, how do we optimize the content and grow the reach, but also very much about internal engagement, getting the newsroom to commit to the idea of being in a relationship with an audience.
Can you tell us more about how your team are organized? So who do you have in your team, how many people, and how do you interact with the rest of the newsroom?
Yeah, so at The Guardian we actually have several different teams roughly kind of broken down along those lines, although social crosses lots and lots of different kind of areas because you can use social in many different ways. There's a strong outbound component where you're using it for distribution, but there's also a strong inbound component where you're using it for story sourcing and also a very strong participatory element if you're trying to start conversations through social. So social kind of cuts across all the kind of ranges of activities that we do. And all of the teams that we have are deeply embedded within the newsroom, deeply embedded within the rest of the organisation. Some on the social and communities team are creating journalism and often creating journalism alongside other desks or in collaboration with other desks. Some, like our audience optimization team, which is led by Chris Moran, are primarily looking at optimizing what we've already got, starting with the journalism and saying, well, how do we get this out there to the largest possible audience? And some are just sort of, so some are. I think part of the impact that the Guardian's tried to create over the last sort of 5 years, really, is getting data into the hands of every editor and getting people in the newsroom who can who can create some of that culture change that you were talking about, who can democratise the information that we have about our audiences and make sure that everybody in the newsroom has not just access but understanding of that information and how they can actually use it to make their work better, to make their work more interesting to the audience or to drive different kinds of behaviour. And that's something that's always evolving. So OFAN, which is our in-house live data platform, is more than 4 years old now, and last month more than 1,000 people at The Guardian logged in to look at some information about the way that our audience was using our journalism. And it's that kind of change means that this isn't something which is sort of isolated in individual teams in the way that perhaps it used to be. It's seen as part of everybody's job to get into the data, to understand the impact that they have. And part of our job is then to facilitate that, to broaden that understanding and to bring new ideas into that mix as well.
And Renee, you two just launched an in-house tool, Lantern.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll start with that, in fact. So often the Guardian tool is sort of an inspiration and a model to us all. I think it is the first tool that got talked about that made everyone realize that, oh, actually, the data thing is translatable to an actual everyday newsroom practice. And so how do we do that? We already had a pre-existing data tool provider that we had developed. It was very powerful, but not very user-friendly. And like all data tools, we had metrics of using the data tool, and the use was not fantastic. And so we've been developing this almost a year-long process, and we just launched it 2 weeks ago. And the main goal of our new tool, which we've dubbed Lantern, about enlightening insights, really is about translating into journalese, like in newsroom vernacular, into actual insights that will mean and indicate an action to journalists. So I would say it has two goals. The first goal is, yes, to get the notion of performance and measurable performance really into the newsroom, down to an every journalist looking at it level. But it's also about using that tool to do a lot of training, do a lot of education in the newsroom around the whole idea of how data is useful. I would say it's both a tool and a process. So one of the things we're doing is just changing the level, even visually within the tool, that you find certain metrics. So on the same level, you'll have page views, you'll have retention rate, you'll have time spent, you'll have scroll depth, You can have it over in real time. You can have it over a certain time. You can search by author name, which is the very first thing that every journalist does, is search for their articles. And so using the tool as a way to talk about data, and as a way, in a very systematic method, to say this is the insight and actually this is the action you can take, is what we're hoping will be that granular sort of bottom-up way of getting people aware of measuring performance and measuring the relationship.
Mary mentioned reach, loyalty, participation, lots of terms that stay within the big audience bucket. And these are the things that we want to measure, right? But what these terms really mean for your newsroom? Like, if we take loyalty, what does loyalty mean for The Guardian and for the FT? Do they mean the same thing?
So this is quite fun, actually. Loyalty is a really difficult thing to define, because for some people, loyalty, or for some organisations, the loyal habit that they want to build is you come back to read what we do every day. And for some, it's every week, and for some, it's every month. And for others, loyalty has nothing at all to do with how often you return to the website, but it might be to do with whether you sign up for an email, or whether you sign up and pay. It might be something that's to do with something more intangible, like how does somebody feel about your organisation? Do they define themselves as a Guardian reader or a Telegraph reader in the way that people used to, when they were buying sort of more branded newspaper primarily? And so you get into this really quite complicated space really, really quickly, where there are so many different possibilities of what loyalty is or ought to mean. And actually, it kind of comes back down to strategy. So as the Guardian's moving more towards membership, one of the things that we've been looking at is what is the loyal behaviour that we're expecting that is going to drive people towards becoming members? And how are we kind of looking at that and defining that and understanding that? And we're in the middle of quite a big process of looking very deeply at all of the data that we've been collecting and trying to define out and map out some of those things. So loyalty for us is probably is probably a mix of things like frequency of readership and tenure of readership. If someone comes to you 3 times this week but they've never been before and they never come back, then are they loyal? But then also we're looking at things like how many pages people read. We're trying to understand about the relationship that that has with how people feel about the Guardian, which is a really, really difficult thing to measure on the internet. And this is really complex. It's really quite a complex beast. But you start with going, again, you start with that endpoint. You start with what is the thing that is most valuable to us? What is the thing that we're driving people to do? And if you know and you have an understanding of that, then the definitions of the other parts start to fall into place.
Yeah, excellent answer. I think it actually probably gives the answer what loyalty is to any media, whatever your platform is. It's really about ultimately what is your objective? What are you, in the end, what are you trying to get your audience to do? And in some ways, for a publication like the Financial Times, it's very simple. In the end, we want them to pay for the content. We want them to subscribe. At the same time, no one in the newsroom is accountable for subscriptions. The audience engagement team for us is very much a newsroom-based team. But we know that at the very end, loyalty for us is going to mean someone who gets enough value out of our content that eventually they will pay for it, they'll subscribe. So where along the way, what along the way do we want to get them to do? And this is where actually kind of what our objective is as an organization has very much informed our structure as an audience engagement team, where we work actually very closely with with the other parts of the business, with the commercial parts of the business, who are indeed trying to get subscriptions in the end. In fact, much of the team is here today. Hello to all of you. And you should reach out to them, because the way we structure the team is along the lines of, okay, we want to incentivize and create a relationship with the audience that is valuable enough that in the end, enough people will buy the Financial Times such that we all keep our jobs and the publication remains viable. So how do we understand what it is that we want our audience to do such that eventually they will show signs of a propensity to subscribe? These are very much, for any of you who have commercial roles in the audience, these are very much sort of the traditional role of conversion, of commercial business. So we've actually integrated into the team a marketing manager, a data analyst, a search director, along with a lot of more traditional journalism roles. Because we need to understand in our commercial model, what are the signs, a user's signs and the relationship that a user has that are revealing of a user who will eventually subscribe. Is it consuming a certain kind of content in a certain frequency? Is it coming back within a certain amount of time? The answer to all these questions is yes. And that we actually have quite a sophisticated model on the commercial side of what we want to be a user, we want a user to be getting to do. So it really comes down to, is the newsroom speaking to the more commercial sides of the business to understand what ultimately we ideally like our audience to be getting and doing from our content. And understanding from an organic newsroom perspective what it is we should be doing to get them to be that commercially defined version of loyal, so that in the end, they will buy the content.
We mentioned reach, and reach might be easier to might seem easier to define, but even the Guardian CEO said recently that reach for the sake of reach is kind of pointless these days, and with the focus on membership and like the different, shifting the focus onto loyalty. And maybe reach is becoming like page views, so we don't really like them anymore. Like, it's not very trendy talking about reach or talking about page views. Yet, it's still probably what the advertisers still look for most. So, is reach still something we should care about?
I feel like there should be a brief digression while I defend page views, because page views are super important. I mean, as long as your organisation isn't trying to gain page views, then page views is one of the things that everybody can affect and everybody can understand. It's really difficult to understand what a session is, and it's quite difficult even to understand what a unique browser is, because it's not the same as a person. So it's not the same as a user ID. And in a business that isn't a subscription business where the majority of our users we can't identify, we can't join them up across devices. You have this sort of slightly woolly thing that it's very difficult to talk about. Everyone understands what a click is, and everybody understands what a click means. If you're trying to build something that everybody in the newsroom can act on, page views are actually still quite handy, because everybody can understand what they can do to change that number, whether it's tweet out their own story, or change how they edit the front page, or, there's lots and lots of different kind of tools that you can use, levers that you can pull, if you like, to make that machine change direction. And that's a really interesting thing, but then you start to get down to how you classify those page views. What exactly it is about them that are interesting, because it isn't just the fact of the click, it's where that click came from, what country was that person in, what county was that person in, maybe what city was that person in. It's questions like how many times had that person come to the Guardian that week. It's questions like what exactly are they clicking on, and is that thing in the right place, have we promoted it in the right ways, are we seeing unexpected behaviours around it? So you need something that everybody can talk about, a shared language and a shared kind of understanding, before you can start to get into exactly why is that important. So when you're talking about reach, you start to get into this similar place where the business needs to understand that kind of big top level, this is how many people we reached number. But actually the bits that different people in the organisation need to care about are probably different slices of that. So for a local news organisation, it might be number of people in the catchment area of that organisation who are reading us. It might just be, once you've got that big number out of the way, you then start narrowing it down. You start narrowing it down to the people that you care about reaching because of what happens to them next. And I think it's very, very easy to talk about the big number and ignore the second step. So we get this many people on the website. But then what happens to them next? Do they come back? Do they do any of the other actions that we care about that happen after they've clicked on something? Because there are lots of those. So for us, I think reach is important, purposeful reach and meaningful reach is important. Reaching the audiences that we know are likely to do more interesting things is kind of the first step of the process. And I think one of the reasons why reach is getting a lot less trendy to talk about is because when you compare any news organisation in the world with Facebook, we've lost that game. We're never going to be 1 billion users. I think everybody in the news organisation kind of feels that now. So you have to start thinking about the other behaviours that you want. But interestingly, reach doesn't go away when you start to think about loyalty. If you look at other industries, the brands with the most loyal consumers tend to be the ones with the largest reach. these things are correlated in some really interesting ways. So you have to kind of think about this as a process that has many stages rather than separated sort of blocks of behaviour.
And the Financial Times being subscription-based, one might think that reach is less important. Is it?
I sort of will abound in the direction of what Mary was saying, in that, sure, I mean, we need readers, and we always need more readers, because old readers go away, and new readers need to arrive, and in any case, we always need more readers than we did before, because the business model is shifting, and indeed that the advertising model that used to be based on sheer numbers is going away. But we need quality reach. And quality reach is probably the single most frequently heard term echoing throughout the halls of the Financial Times, because quality reach means reaching more people, but more people who are likely to be impacted and eventually, somewhere down the funnel, more likely to subscribe. But to reverse that question is, so what is quality reach? Who are the people most likely to be impacted by our content? Where are they? What time are most people coming? What is the kind of format they're most consuming when? What are the differences in formats that different audiences on different platforms are most consuming and what times? It is about nuancing both the idea of reach and page views. Page views are vital. I completely agree, they're completely vital, but they're useless alone. They're vital as an integrated metric that also includes other signs of being not just reach, but quality reach. So quality is all of those elements of staying longer, consuming more, coming back more frequently, sharing it more, liking it more, participating more, sending your suggestions, giving all these different signs that you're getting value out of it, that's relevant to you. And the more that we can use our tools to understand who our audience is, what time they're there, what they really want, in what formats, it doesn't mean we're going to only do that. None of us, and as already in the Financial Times, are pure reach machines, although there are plenty of them out there. We're very successful. I mean, BuzzFeed has this fascinating model where on the one hand they're a 100% reach machine, on the other hand they're subsidizing incredibly quality investigative journalism. It has nothing to do with reach, it's just to do with quality. As a business, the Financial Times doesn't have the luxury to be either or. We have to be both all the time. So that's why I think it's vital to reassure the newsroom you can keep your page views. It's still important. Grow your numbers. It feels really good and you're allowed to have that rush, that good sugar high. But it's not good nutrition to just eat sugar. And you really need to understand more about your audience so that you can actually be building a sustainable, healthy diet of reactions that you want to get from them.
We also mentioned participation and community, and so of course we think about comments, terrible comments that everyone hates. Is there business value in comments?
There is, for the case of the Financial Times, it would be interesting because we have very different relationships to our comments because very different business models. Our comments are vital to us because our commenters are our subscribers. And it is, for anyone who has a paid content business, you know that it's equally as important to retain your subscribers as it is to get new ones. And so comments on site and conversation on site are part of the value that a paying subscriber gets out of the content. It's part of the relationship that we want them to be having with us, feeling like that they care enough about their content, it's relevant enough to them that they would want to contribute. We've only just begun developing our comment strategy, to be honest. We've always had a relatively small core group of very active commenters, and we mostly tried to keep them happy enough. Because as all of you know, it takes just a few bad comments to not only ruin the relationship that our readers have with our comments, but ruin the relationship that our journalists have with engaging with the commenters. And that bit of the relationship is almost even more complex to manage because we're only as good as the relationship that our reporters are going to build with their commenters. That relationship is vital to the value that our commenters get out of it. So where do you start? Frankly, the place we're starting is with a lot of experimenting. Figuring out, does highlighting the good comments get more people to comment or raise the commenting level? Does creating a way, this is our most recent experiment with our community manager who's here somewhere, does creating a way for our commenters to send in tips or information in a more private way get them to engage more? And then also, comments are not just important in building a relationship, they're also, again, a really good metric for are our subscribers getting value out of our content? And if they're not, what can we do to get them to show more signs of getting value out of our content and commenting more?
The Guardian comes from a different place in this.
Yeah, we do. And we think comments are really important as well. I mean, for a lot of quite similar reasons, actually. I mean, people who comment on your journalism are likely to be people that care about it the most. It doesn't necessarily mean that what they care about is, they care about it in a positive way. They might be very angry with you. Sometimes the reason they're very angry with you is because you've just done something that isn't like the organisation that they thought they wanted you to be. And now they want to tell you about that because there's a problem there. It's, in some cases, comments you can actually see as a sort of customer service issue. I was expecting this sort of behaviour and service, and you've given me this, and I'm very angry about that because that's not what I was expecting, that's not what I wanted, you shouldn't be doing it like that. And those kinds of comments are valuable to the business in all sorts of ways that aren't necessarily kind of particularly tangible. And understanding that that's what people are saying requires you to go and listen to the comments. You have to be present, you have to be there, you have to be able to actually take those words into account. One of the issues with growing reach and growing scale is that comment moderation and comment management at the moment doesn't scale in the same way that some other systems do. It requires more people. If you're going to do it well and you're going to have a real understanding of the behaviours that you're seeing in the comments, you need skilled, intelligent, very, very thoughtful comment moderators, which we have a fantastic team at The Guardian who are deeply, deeply invested both in the conversations that they're managing and also in the idea that these are journalistically useful conversations a lot of the time. Not just for the people that say, hey, you made a typo, but also for the people that come into threads and say, I have experience of this, I know what this is like, this happened to me, I understand this. And part of what we can do if we're listening to those comments is say, hey, there's a story there, there's something there that we want to elevate, that we want to talk about, that we want to bring back into the journalism. And that is valuable almost beyond measure, in a very literal way. We don't have systems at the moment that can measure how many of our comments turn into further stories, or how many of our comments then get used in different ways by the journalists that are receiving them. But the internet is a conversation, and everybody in this room has a phone, and they use it to talk to people, not just to consume stuff. And if we want to be taken seriously as a digital business, I think it's part and parcel of the basic deal is that you have to be part of the conversation. And I think, in this world of kind of social media and platforms, and especially in terms of messaging apps, news organisations seem to be one of the only industries where we're actually retreating from having a conversation with our audience. And that seems like a very, very, very short-sighted approach to me. But then I work at The Guardian, so I would say that.
In the Reuters Institute report on editorial analytics, we found that newsroom might be good in measuring, because there is no lack of tools to measure the audience these days, whether it's like in-house or like one of the tools that are available to everyone. But when it comes to the decisions they take on those data, like they gather all the data, but like moving to the next step becomes more complicated, and then many newsrooms become less strategic. So how do you translate the analysis into action? Do you benchmark? Do you have targets? How do you make sure that all the gathering of the data actually gets to the next step?
I think so for us that varies depending on who it is that's using the data. So we don't have kind of traditional targets, but we do look at the way that different sections perform and the different audiences, the different makeups of those sections. And we look at especially kind of particular news events and the ways that things change. We have a daily kind of bulletin which goes out, which looks at sort of what happened yesterday and tries to get into understanding of that. And in part, what we're aiming to do is give people insight into the data that's relevant for them so that they can make the decisions that they need to based off that data. But it's about kind of supporting understanding and supporting learning and supporting knowledge so that people can make data-informed decisions. I think the distinction between data-informed and data-driven is actually quite important for us and for a lot of other news organisations. And it's a similar kind of argument to what you see around what Facebook promotes in its newsfeed, this idea that what people actually click on most is not necessarily what they want to read all of the time. The idea that you can't live on sugar, but it's slightly kind of, yeah. So for us, it's as much about just making sure that every editor has not just the numbers that they need, but also the insight, the analysis, the understanding of those numbers to be able to use them intelligently.
I think that the way you pose the question actually reveals what I think for us at the FT, this is sort of the core of how to do data. Insight and analysis is great, but what is the action you take from that? And how do you get the newsroom to understand that relationship and to understand how they're concerned on the individual granular kind of journalist reporter level. You know, we all talk to editors a lot probably because they have somewhat more oversight and are making perhaps the more strategic kind of commission decisions. But fundamentally, figuring out how data insight equals action and translating that all the time, because it is a somewhat slow iterative process, because it is also teaching a newsroom a new language. A language they don't necessarily want to learn, that they're not necessarily feeling concerned about, that they would actually just as soon not be bothered by, is part of the democratization of data. So you're mentioning, Mary, some different things that you can measure, and I think that sort of say two things. First of all, measure everything all the time and talk about it a lot. So measure an individual journalist's story. Measure especially your bigger projects, the special big news events, or their recurrent ones, or a special one-off project or a series. Something that in any case already has the organization and the newsroom's focus. Measure growth. Measure the growth of audience on different platforms. Measure growth of a specific kind of engaged time with a specific kind of format. Measure the kind of scroll rate or finish rate you're getting in different kinds of content. These aren't necessarily fixed targets, although I think you definitely should set targets because that's the actionable part of the insight, is this is the insight, we're here, we want to get there. And you know, nobody's trying again. Nobody in the newsroom is responsible for a subscription, even though that is the target in the end of the FT. But maybe they can be responsible for growth. We're here now, we'd like to see an upward moving curve. Those are ways I think that broadly speaking, you can create a notion of benchmarking, where benchmarking isn't necessarily we're at this number of page views or this retention rate, we want to be here next. It's more about we want to grow it globally. And finding occasions, excuses, editorial excuses in the newsroom, again, whether it's a story or a news event or yesterday, what happened yesterday, finding those editorial excuses to talk about it a lot. So that eventually it becomes internalized. It becomes part of the hygiene of, I had a great idea, I went and reported it, I produced a story, and these are the results. And the results are something that are actually data informed. And the way I talk about it in the newsroom is not just, yeah, it did really well, it actually had a really good retention rate, and the scroll time was amazing compared to what I did personally in the past 6 months.
I think in addition to that, the other element of this is the strategy. Because data can't give you a strategy. Strategy comes from somewhere else, and then you use the data to inform the actions that you take that get you towards that strategy. Anybody who's relying on data to provide them with a strategy, it doesn't come organically from the numbers. And it has to be something that is thought about, talked about, understood throughout the entire newsroom, and everybody has to kind of get on board with the idea that, you know, we're a subscription business, we go to subscriptions. We are moving towards being a membership business. That means that strategically some of the decisions that we make are going to be made based on different metrics, based on different approaches. And that's key, and I think that's often missing in discussions about how data works.
Because we talk about participation and conversation, it's time to open to our audience now. But you have one takeaway for a small newsroom that doesn't have the same resources and structure that the Guardian and FT have to deal with the audience. One suggestion, one piece of advice.
Always be experimenting. Small experiments, changing a format, playing with something in the comments, trying a new publication time strategy. All of these small experiments with understanding, with a clear objective. This is what I'm trying, this is what I'm hoping to get from it. Count. Because I see sort of audience engagement in general as being very small, step by step. It's sort of like a pointillist kind of Seurat painting. It's lots of small dots that are the experiments that have objectives. And in the end, all of these dots will reveal an image that is probably the future of your media.
I think what I'd say, especially to smaller newsrooms, is know your strategy and then prioritise the news listening. When we went out when the Guardian launched the Sydney office and the Australian edition, I was part of the launch team there. That was a very, very, very small team, admittedly with a very, very large resource base, who were all asleep all of the time because it's an 11-hour time difference. And when there's a very, very small number of you, that forces you to really think about what exactly it is that you're trying to achieve. If you don't know what you're trying to achieve, you can't achieve it. So everything became about what's the point, who are we trying to reach with this, what do we want them to do, how are we going to make that happen? And anything that didn't serve that, you don't do. But within that scope, within that nicely defined area, you play and you experiment and you do as much as you possibly can. So I'd say, yeah, get your strategy and then work to your strategy absolutely ruthlessly.
Questions?
Hi, I'm Erica. I love what you guys have to say. A big question I have is, how do we start to treat our audiences differently, right? We're all different individuals. We have, I think, a lot about time and like how much time different types of readers, watchers, listeners actually have in a day and how we all are different. So how do we start to use data and behavior to inform, maybe the expectation around how I engage with the FT or the Guardian is different than the expectation on how Charlotte does?
I think it's a really good question about diversifying your audiences, at least get a perception from the newsroom, right, where you are broadcasting to lots of different people, and your audiences on different platforms are going to be very different. Certainly that's the case with a subscription publication like the FT. The people coming to the website are quite different from the people who are consuming our content on social media, who actually are quite different even amongst themselves with the different social media platforms. The fantastic thing about most of these platforms that have the biggest audiences is that you can know a lot about who your audience is, where they are, how old they are, what gender they are, what they prefer. And so creating a profile, a platform-based profile of who your audience is, and thinking about how not every kind of content or every strategy is going to work across all platforms. And that as complex as it is, you do have to diversify your strategies. And as Mary pointed out, I think this is a great takeaway. Well, maybe if you're a smaller publication or a smaller newsroom and don't have all the resources, well, pick a priority. Maybe your priority is your website, or maybe your priority is Facebook, or maybe your priority is a certain kind of platform, because indeed the audience will be very different, and you should figure out what is unique about each audience on each platform.
I think as well, a lot of the time that this question of how we treat audiences differently is a combination of an editorial and a product question. Because sometimes the answer is some people are on the app first thing in the morning and they want a particular kind of news service at 6:30 a.m. as they're getting out of bed, and they want something very different potentially at 7 p.m. as they're checking in, just after the kids have gone to sleep. And that's as much about the things that we choose to promote, the ways that we choose to build our products, the ways that we deliver our journalism to our readers. It is about defining the way that the journalism should change. And in some cases, I think one of the best ways of understanding how audiences want to be treated differently is asking them. And as an industry, we have a tendency to go, I think you probably want this, let's just try that. And not actually sort of have that conversation with people about how they want to be served at different times, what it is exactly that they're trying to achieve with our journalism, and how we should be facilitating that.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I work at CNN. Just going off what you were just saying, a lot of times, anyone who works in engagement knows what our audience tells us they want and what their behavior tells us they want aren't always the same thing, right? You can post a cat story and all the comments will say, this isn't news, it'll also be your most clicked story of the day. So how do you guys think you balance those two things?
I'd say by taking all of your data sources together and not relying on one. I mean, for the people who are commenting and saying, this is news and it annoyed me, that's a perfectly valid expression of their opinion. There are going to be a lot of other people out there who weren't annoyed by it, who wouldn't have felt the need to actually kind of write and tell you that. And it's up to you, again, some of this is back to the individual strategy of the newsroom as to how much weight and how much emphasis you place on each of those behaviours and how important you think each one of those signals is. So each of those is a signal and it's potentially telling you something useful.
I think it's exactly right. There's never going to be any sort of one-size-fits-all answer about do I give them more of what I think they want versus more of what they're actually clicking on. But if I gave them only what they were clicking on, they would not recognize the media or the journalism that they thought that they were buying into, quite literally in the case of the FT. So I think it's probably maybe perhaps unlike the Guardian, different from the Guardian, we're more in a strategy of let's just try this and see how people react. We're probably better at that than the conversation aspect. Again, also because the people who choose to tell you what they want will probably be a very small vocal minority who don't necessarily represent the much more vast majority of people. That's always the complexity with conversational relationships and with comments or with community, is that there's going to be a small vocal minority. So I think you need to make a gander and try it and see how it goes.
I think I should say as well, one of the things that we use is UX testing, for example, where people screen for particular kinds of relationships with us. So that conversational thing is not just about having a chat in the comments, it's also about the ways in which you engage your audience in the development of your products, the development of your journalism potentially. So.
Thank you for a very interesting discussion. My name is Carlos Tolinder from University of Helsinki. I was thinking about, everybody's talking about big data, and we know these disappointments that big companies have had with analyzing user data and consumer data and not getting the right sort of information that they want. And news organizations is coming later to this party and sort of had the same problems. But what about small data? I mean, that's a really important part of understanding your customers also inside big companies. And how do you think about, sort of individual customers and their sort of thinking and the insights you get? How do you sort of address this issue? And the second part of the question, intuition. I mean, how do you, the journalism intuition, is it out of business now? Is it not valid anymore? Or is there some sort of value to journalism intuition?
I feel like I can answer the second part better than I can answer the first part. In terms of intuition, intuition is a gut feeling generally based on years of quite specialised experience. A lot of things don't necessarily have a definitive answer, and intuition is what we go on every day. I'd say that hasn't gone away, but now that intuition, the formation of that intuition is developed by additional data and additional knowledge that we wouldn't in theory have had in the past. So what you're giving people is tools with which to make those gut decisions, in the spur of the moment, in the middle of breaking news, because they have even more knowledge and experience to base that gut feeling on.
I completely agree. I think that journalistic intuition. Intuition, you said it very well, is in some ways that gut feeling, which is informed by a lot of expertise and experience and training and insight. And in fact, that intelligence is exactly why any user is coming to your journalism. It's because you have some kind of core expertise. There's a core value that you provide that someone else does not. That is so important still and so invaluable that, frankly, without that core intuition, that core journalistic know-how, the insight, the intelligence, the product doesn't have any value. But I think it is the core. And around the core, I don't know, to mix a million metaphors, there's sort of an octopus, right? That's sort of the beating heart of the octopus. There are many arms now that need to reach out and understand different things about the audience, understand different things about performance, about format. And that needs to feed the beast just as much. I didn't quite get the first part of the question.
Well, small data, surveys, small user sort of interactions, feedback groups, sort of thing.
There is, for sure, they're real human beings who actually tell you stuff versus some of the big data are key. And in fact, as I mentioned earlier, as an organization, we're very much aligned and collaborating a lot with the commercial and data and research parts of the organization. And for example, our customer insight does a lot of reader surveys, a lot of research groups, a lot of feedback. Nothing is more powerful, especially to communicate to the newsroom. This famous feedback loop to the newsroom, which actually has to happen if you want to get anything done, you probably do need to accompany results with a citation from readers. actual reader feedback. What real people in some kind of survey group will say is not necessarily representative, but it can be illustrative of a bigger trend that the bigger data may reveal.
Just one last question here.
John Evans from Transtel. You mentioned using data analytics to inform decisions in the newsroom. Can you comment on the distinction between decisions that would say we need to change the style or duration of the editorial content versus decisions that are really more technical platform based, that say we should be putting much more on Instagram now and less on YouTube, or our app is, the articles aren't big enough, aren't appropriate for our app, or things like that which are really not editorial decisions.
It's interesting that you say that what happens on Instagram and YouTube isn't an editorial decision, because I think it is. Things that we decide to post on Instagram, we post there because editorially we believe something is important about the things that we post. We're not posting things that have no journalistic value. So I think perhaps we don't make quite the same distinction that you're talking about there.
It was really the decision to make that change. So I mean, you can say I'd like this written in a different style, and you could sort of do that there and then. But to say we're now going to do a lot more with Instagram is that? I mean,
I think this is the difference maybe between tactics and strategy.
Yeah.
So generally, we don't change body, like the content and the body copy of articles based purely on user behaviour. There has to be a journalistic kind of point to doing that, and very often there is. There's plenty of stories develop and change and evolve after they've been published. Live blogs are kind of only one of the examples of that. But in terms of using the data to inform a general approach, that is something that we try to work on a kind of on a slower rhythm than the sort of split second decisions about what headline a story might have. We might look at, we talked a little bit earlier about looking at sort of the way that a particular project has been developed, and then taking lessons from that to apply to the next time we do a big project, for example. And that covers not just how we present things externally, but also how we commission content, how we, it might inform the research that we do about a subject before we start to commission it even.
I would agree that I'm not sure that the distinction is the most useful one to make, especially if everything that we're trying to do in terms of having a strategy and reaching objectives is necessarily going to mean changing the way we did it before. So changing the style is probably very much on the same level as changing the platform of distribution, or changing the format, or even the topic, or the volume of a certain kind of topic we're covering, may be just as tactically useful to achieving a strategy as rethinking publication times and user experience with a certain product. I would say, frankly, in fact, one of the products of successful audience engagement, at least on an internal engagement level, might in fact be kind of the leveling of those decisions, where there's not really a hierarchy anymore between what is editorial versus what is technological. They're actually very much combined and often simultaneous, and ought maybe to be sort of, I would say, codependent. Everything is kind of a hybrid editorial technological decision, or at least ought to be, because increasingly so much of your audience's pleasure and value and that they get out of your content will be as informed by the technology and experience as it is by the content.
Thank you very much. We've run out of time.
Thank you guys.